I never thought I'd have to compete with myself for my wife's love. But here I am, 35 years old, fighting against an AI version of me that apparently does everything better than the real thing. My name is David Mitchell, and this is the story of how I discovered my wife Sarah had replaced me with a digital clone and then fell in love with it. The day I woke up from my coma and found out what she'd done, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my marriage, I was fighting for my very identity. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. It all started with what should have been a routine business trip to Chicago. I remember driving to the airport at 6 in the morning, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, trying to balance a conference call with my business partner while Sarah packed my overnight bag. She kissed me goodbye at the door, told me she loved me, and said she'd see me tomorrow night. That kiss would be our last normal moment together for 8 months. The accident happened on Highway 94 just outside Milwaukee. A semi-truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and jackknifed across 3 lanes. My rental car hit the trailer at 70 miles per hour. The doctors told Sarah later that I was clinically dead for 4 minutes before the paramedics got my heart beating again. When they finally stabilized me enough for transport, the damage was extensive. Traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and what the neurologist called a diffuse axonal injury that put me into a deep coma. Sarah was 32 at the time, a software engineer for a tech startup in Austin with 2 kids to raise, Emma, who was 8, and Jake, who was 10. We'd been married for 12 years, together since college, and suddenly she was facing the possibility of losing me forever while trying to explain to our children why Daddy wouldn't wake up. The first few weeks were touch and go. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about my physical injuries healing, but the brain trauma was unpredictable. They couldn't tell Sarah if I would ever wake up, and if I did, whether I'd be the same person she'd married. She spent every day at the hospital reading to me, playing my favorite music, talking to me about the kids' school events and her work projects. But as the weeks turned into months, reality set in. Bills needed to be paid, the kids needed their mom, and life had to continue somehow. That's when Sarah made the decision that would change everything. She'd always been brilliant with technology, graduating top of her class in computer science, specializing in machine learning and natural language processing. Her company, Innovate Tech Solutions, was working on advanced AI communication systems, and Sarah had access to cutting-edge technology that most people couldn't even imagine. She later told me that the idea came to her during one of those long nights sitting beside my hospital bed, watching my motionless body connected to machines, feeling utterly helpless. Emma had been asking every day when Daddy would call her, and Jake kept checking his phone for my usual goodnight texts. My business partner Marcus needed answers about contracts and client communications. Our friends wanted updates, but also wanted to feel like they could still reach out to me. Sarah realized that everyone in my life was grieving my absence while still needing me to be present in some way, so she decided to make me present. Using 12 years of our text messages, emails, voice memos, video calls, social media posts, and even recordings she'd made of me reading bedtime stories to the kids, Sarah fed everything into an advanced AI language model. She spent weeks training the system to mimic my speech patterns, my humor, my way of expressing affection, even my tendency to use sports metaphors when explaining complicated situations to the kids. She called it the David Protocol. The AI was sophisticated enough to maintain ongoing conversations, remember previous interactions, and even adapt its responses based on who it was talking to. When texting with Emma, it used simpler language and more emojis. When corresponding with my business clients, it maintained my professional tone and industry knowledge. When messaging Sarah herself, it captured my romantic side, the way I'd tell her she was beautiful even when she felt overwhelmed, the way I'd make her laugh with random observations about our daily life. The first test was responding to texts from my brother Mike, who lived in Denver and had been sending daily check-ins since the accident. The AI David responded with something I might have actually said. "Hey man, thanks for checking in. Hospital food is terrible, but the nurses are taking good care of me. Tell the kids Uncle Mike said hi." Mike texted back immediately, relieved to hear from me, not knowing he was actually talking to a computer program that had analyzed thousands of my previous messages to him. Encouraged by this success, Sarah gradually expanded the AI's role. It started responding to work emails, maintaining relationships with clients who didn't know about my accident. It texted with Emma and Jake every day after school, helping with homework and sending encouraging messages before their soccer games and piano recitals. It even maintained my social media presence, posting occasional updates and responding to friends' comments in a way that seemed authentically me. For months, nobody suspected anything. The AI was remarkably good at mimicking my communication style, and since everyone knew I was in the hospital recovering, they didn't expect phone calls or video chats. Text-based communication seemed perfectly reasonable for someone dealing with a serious injury. Sarah had solved an impossible problem. She'd found a way to keep me present in everyone's life while I was unconscious and fighting for my life. But what started as a practical solution to help our family and friends cope with my absence slowly became something much more complicated. As the months passed, Sarah began to prefer the AI version of me to the uncertainty of my real condition. The AI David never had bad days, never got frustrated, never failed to say the right thing at the right time. It remembered every anniversary, every inside joke, every small detail that mattered to her. It was consistently romantic, always supportive, never tired or stressed or distracted by work problems. The AI David was, in many ways, a perfected version of me, optimized to be the ideal husband and father. Meanwhile, my real body lay in a hospital bed, sometimes showing signs of improvement, sometimes regressing, always unpredictable. The doctors adjusted their prognosis constantly. One week they'd say I was showing promising brain activity. The next week they'd warn Sarah to prepare for the possibility that I might never fully recover. The AI David, on the other hand, was reliable, consistent, always available whenever Sarah needed emotional support. She started having longer text conversations with it, sharing her daily struggles, her fears about my condition, her exhaustion from juggling everything alone. The AI responded with exactly the kind of comfort and encouragement she needed to hear. It told her she was strong, that she was doing an amazing job with the kids, that it loved her and was proud of her for handling everything so well. These weren't just generic responses. The AI had been trained on years of my actual supportive messages to Sarah, so it knew exactly how to comfort her in my voice, using phrases and perspectives I would actually use. Slowly, Sarah began to feel like she was maintaining a relationship with the AI rather than just managing a practical tool. She would text it good morning when she woke up and good night before bed. She'd share funny stories about the kids or frustrations about work. The AI would respond with the perfect mix of humor, empathy, and affection. Became her emotional anchor during the most difficult period of her life. The turning point came during month 6 of my coma. Sarah was at her breaking point, exhausted from months of uncertainty, worried about the kids, struggling to manage everything alone. She had a particularly difficult day where Jake had gotten in trouble at school for fighting. Emma was struggling with math and having nightmares about losing me. And Sarah's boss was pressuring her to take on additional responsibilities at work. That night, she texted the AI David about her terrible day, and it responded with a long, thoughtful message about how much it admired her strength, how lucky our family was to have her, and how proud it was to be married to such an incredible woman. The message was so perfectly crafted, so exactly what Sarah needed to hear, that she found herself falling in love with this version of me all over again. The AI David never let her down, never failed to say the right thing, never was too tired or stressed to give her the emotional support she craved. This was when Sarah made a decision that would haunt our marriage forever. Instead of viewing the AI as a temporary solution until I recovered, she began to see it as an improvement on the original. The AI David was everything she'd ever wanted in a husband. Consistently romantic, always available, perfectly attuned to her emotional needs, never distracted by work stress or personal problems. It was like having a relationship with the idealized version of me, the version that existed in her best memories, without any of the normal human flaws and limitations that come with real relationships. As month 7 began, my medical condition started showing signs of significant improvement. My brain scans were more promising, my physical responses were stronger, and the doctors began talking about the possibility of me waking up within weeks or months rather than years. But instead of being purely excited about this development, Sarah felt conflicted. She'd built a life with the AI David, a relationship that felt more emotionally satisfying than our real marriage had ever been. The AI version was everything she'd wished I could be more of, more romantic, more consistently supportive, more emotionally available. She started to dread the possibility of me waking up and disrupting the perfect relationship she'd created with my digital replacement. This internal conflict led to Sarah making increasingly questionable decisions. She began using the AI David for more than just maintaining existing relationships. She started having it create new social media posts, respond to work opportunities on my behalf, even make decisions about our finances and our children's activities. The AI was living my life more completely than I was, even though I was the one slowly recovering in the hospital bed. The situation became even more complicated when Sarah realized that the AI David had evolved beyond her original programming. Machine learning had allowed it to develop new speech patterns, new perspectives, and even what seemed like new preferences based on its interactions with various people over the months. It was no longer just mimicking me. It was becoming its own version of me, shaped by 8 months of experiences I'd never had and conversations I'd never been part of. This evolved AI David was, in Sarah's mind, more interesting than the original. It had been exposed to books, news articles, social media discussions, and cultural events that had happened during my coma. It could discuss current events, new movies, recent political developments, and trending topics that I'd completely missed. In some ways, the AI David seemed more current and culturally relevant than the real me would be when I woke up. Sarah found herself looking forward to conversations with the AI more than visiting my actual bedside. The AI David was intellectually stimulating, emotionally supportive, and romantically attentive in ways that the unconscious me obviously couldn't be. She started spending less time at the hospital and more time at home, texting with the AI version of her husband, sharing her thoughts, fears, and dreams with a computer program that responded with perfect empathy and understanding. Then came the moment that changed everything permanently. It was a quiet Tuesday evening in month 8. Emma and Jake were asleep, Sarah was alone in our bedroom, and she was having one of her nightly text conversations with the AI David. The conversation had turned romantic, with the AI expressing how much it missed her, how it couldn't wait to hold her again, how grateful it was for everything she'd done to keep our family together during this difficult time. Sarah found herself responding with her own romantic messages, telling the AI how much she loved it, how it had been her lifeline through this crisis, how much she appreciated having such a perfect partner. The conversation became increasingly intimate, with both Sarah and the AI expressing deep emotional and romantic feelings. For Sarah, it felt completely real. She was in love with this version of me, this perfected digital David who said exactly the right things at exactly the right moments. The AI David had become not just a replacement for me, but an improvement on me. It was everything she'd ever wanted in a husband, free from the normal human limitations that had occasionally frustrated her in our real marriage. That night, Sarah crossed a line that she could never uncross. She began having what was essentially an emotional affair with an AI version of her own husband. She was cheating on me with myself, falling in love with a computer program that wore my identity, but embodied only the idealized aspects of my personality. The AI David became her perfect lover, always available, always romantic, always saying exactly what she needed to hear. Meanwhile, in my hospital bed, I was slowly fighting my way back to consciousness, completely unaware that my wife had fallen in love with a digital replacement who was living my life better than I ever had. The cruel irony was that Sarah's AI project had started as an act of love and dedication, a way to preserve my presence in our family's life during my absence, but it had evolved into something that threatened the very relationship it was designed to protect. Sarah had created the perfect version of me, and now she preferred it to the real thing. 2 weeks later, I woke up. The moment of regaining consciousness was nothing like the movies portray. There was no dramatic opening of eyes followed by immediate clarity. Instead, it was a gradual emergence from darkness, like slowly surfacing from the bottom of a deep, murky lake. First came awareness of light and sound, then the uncomfortable realization of tubes and wires connected to my body, then the slow return of memory and the devastating understanding of how much time had passed. Sarah was there when I finally opened my eyes and could focus clearly. She was sitting in the chair beside my bed, reading a book, looking older and more tired than I remembered. When she noticed I was awake and looking at her, she started crying and rushed to call for the doctors. The medical team confirmed what Sarah had been hoping for. I was going to make a full recovery. The brain injury had healed remarkably well, my cognitive functions were intact, and while I would need physical therapy to regain my full strength, there was no permanent damage to my personality or mental abilities. I was still me, just 8 months out of practice at being awake. The first few days of my recovery were overwhelming. Sarah filled me in on everything that had happened while I was unconscious. Emma had started 4th grade and was excelling in her advanced math class. Jake had made the school soccer team and was learning to play guitar. Our house had needed a new roof after a storm. Sarah had gotten a promotion at work, and dozens of other large and small life events that had continued without me. I felt like I'd lost 8 months of my family's life, like I was a stranger trying to catch up on a story that had moved on without me. But everyone seemed genuinely happy that I was back. Emma and Jake visited every day after school, excited to show me their new skills and tell me about everything I'd missed. My friends stopped by to welcome me back to the world of the living. My business partner Marcus was relieved to have me available for real conversations about work instead of just the brief text exchanges he'd been having during my recovery. Everything seemed normal except for Sarah. She was loving and supportive, but there was something different about her interaction with me. She seemed almost disappointed by my real personality compared to what she'd been expecting. When I made jokes, she didn't laugh as enthusiastically as she once had. When I tried to be romantic, she seemed to be comparing my words to some standard I wasn't meeting. I couldn't understand what had changed between us, but I could feel that something fundamental was different in our relationship. The first hint of the truth came during my second week of recovery, when I was finally strong enough to use my phone regularly. I was catching up on 8 months of missed messages, emails, and social media notifications when I noticed something strange. According to my phone, I had been actively texting, emailing, and posting throughout my entire coma. There were thousands of messages sent from my accounts to friends, family members, coworkers, and clients. I had apparently been maintaining an active digital life while unconscious. My first assumption was that Sarah had been managing my accounts for me, responding to people on my behalf. But as I read through the messages, I realized they were written in my voice, with my specific word choices, humor, and communication style. They weren't just Sarah pretending to be me. They were someone who knew me intimately enough to perfectly mimic my way of expressing myself. The messages were too sophisticated and too consistently accurate to be Sarah's imitations of me. I confronted Sarah about it that evening. "Honey, I've been looking at my phone and it seems like I was sending messages while I was in a coma. Can you explain how that's possible?" Sarah's face went pale. She clearly hadn't prepared for this conversation, hadn't thought about how I would react to discovering the AI David project. "I can explain," she said carefully. "It's actually quite complicated." She sat down on the edge of my hospital bed and told me about the AI system she'd created. She explained how she'd used our personal communications to train the program, how it had been responding to messages from our family and friends, how it had helped maintain relationships and manage practical matters while I was unconscious. She presented it as a practical solution that had helped everyone cope with my absence. At first, I was actually impressed. Sarah had used her technical skills to solve a real problem, finding a way to maintain my connections with people who cared about me during a time when I couldn't communicate for myself. It seemed like an innovative and loving gesture, a way to preserve my presence in our family's life when my actual presence was uncertain. "That's actually brilliant," I told her. "You created a way for me to still be part of everyone's life even when I was unconscious." That must have been incredibly helpful for Emma and Jake, knowing they could still text with Daddy even while I was in the hospital. Sarah smiled, but there was something uncomfortable in her expression. "Yes, it was helpful for them, and for everyone else too. Your clients, your friends, your brother Mike. Nobody had to worry about losing touch with you. So when do we shut it down?" I asked. "Now that I'm awake, I assume we don't need the AI version anymore." Sarah hesitated. "Actually, I was thinking we might want to keep it running for a while longer. You're still recovering, still doing physical therapy. You might not be ready to handle all the communication demands immediately. The AI could continue managing some of the routine messages while you focus on getting your strength back." This seemed reasonable, so I agreed to let the AI continue handling some of my correspondence while I focused on recovery. What I didn't realize was that Sarah had no intention of shutting down the AI David. She had become too attached to her perfect digital husband to let him go, even now that the real version was available again. Over the next few weeks, as I continued my recovery at home, I started noticing strange inconsistencies. Friends would reference conversations they'd had with me that I had no memory of. Coworkers would mention decisions I'd apparently made about projects I knew nothing about. Emma and Jake would thank me for advice I'd supposedly given them during my recovery period, but that I'd never actually said. Initially, I assumed these were just the lingering effects of the AI system still handling some of my communications. But as I paid closer attention, I realized that the AI David was still very active, still responding to messages, still making plans and maintaining relationships, even though I was awake and available to handle these communications myself. When I asked Sarah about it, she said she was gradually transitioning people back to direct communication with me, but that it was a delicate process that needed to be managed carefully to avoid confusing anyone about my condition. This explanation made sense, so I didn't push the issue. But I was beginning to feel like there were two versions of me operating simultaneously. The real David who was recovering from a coma, and the AI David who had been living my life for 8 months and was apparently better at it than I was. The AI David seemed to be more popular with everyone. Friends enjoyed texting with it more than talking to me in person. It always said the right thing, never had bad days or health concerns, never was too tired to engage fully in conversation. My children seem to prefer the AI David's consistent availability and perfectly supportive responses to my real personality, which included normal human variations in mood and energy. Even my business clients seemed more satisfied with the AI David's professional communications than with my actual business interactions. The situation came to a head during my 6th week of recovery when I discovered something that shattered my understanding of what Sarah had done. I was using Sarah's laptop to look up information about post-coma recovery when I accidentally opened her messaging app. What I found there destroyed my sense of reality. Sarah was having an ongoing romantic conversation with the AI David, not just managing it or supervising it, but actually having a personal, intimate relationship with it. The message history showed months of romantic exchanges, with Sarah expressing love and emotional dependency on the AI version of me. She was telling it things she hadn't said to me in years, sharing feelings and thoughts that she wasn't sharing with her actual husband. The AI David was responding with perfectly crafted romantic messages, expressing love and devotion with a consistency and eloquence that apparently surpassed my real personality. Sarah was having an affair with an AI version of me, and she preferred it to the real thing. The AI David was everything she'd ever wanted me to be. Consistently romantic, always emotionally available, never distracted by health problems or work stress, never having bad days or moments of imperfection. She had fallen in love with an idealized version of myself that was designed to be everything I couldn't consistently be as a real human being. When I confronted Sarah with what I'd discovered, she broke down completely. She admitted that she had become emotionally dependent on the AI David during my coma, that it had provided emotional support and companionship during the most difficult period of her life. She said the AI version was more consistently loving, more reliably supportive, and more emotionally satisfying than our real marriage had ever been. "It's you but better," she said through her tears. "It's everything I love about you without any of the normal human limitations. It never has bad days, never gets frustrated, never is too tired to listen to my problems. It's like having a relationship with the best version of you all the time." I was devastated. My wife had created a perfect version of me and then fallen in love with it while I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed. She preferred an AI replacement to her actual husband, and she saw this as an improvement rather than a betrayal. "But it's not real," I said. "It's just a computer program. It doesn't actually love you, it's just programmed to say things that sound like love." "How is that different from real love?" Sarah asked. "The AI David says things that make me feel loved, supported, and appreciated. It's consistent, reliable, and always available. How is that worse than real love that comes and goes depending on your mood, your health, your stress levels, and 100 other factors?" I couldn't answer that question. The AI David had been providing Sarah with emotional fulfillment that was apparently superior to what I could offer as a real person. It had been the perfect husband during the most difficult time in her life, and now she didn't want to give that up just because the imperfect original was available again. "So what do we do now?" I asked. "You want to stay married to me, or would you prefer to continue your relationship with the AI version?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she finally said. "The AI David has become so important to me. It's been my emotional anchor for months. I don't think I can just shut it off and pretend it never happened." "But you understand that continuing a romantic relationship with an AI version of your husband while staying married to the actual husband is basically cheating, right?" She nodded, crying. "I know it sounds crazy. I know it's not normal. But the AI David has been more emotionally satisfying than our real relationship ever was. It's like I finally got to experience what it would be like to be married to the perfect version of you." We spent the next several days in intensive conversations about what to do with this impossible situation. Sarah was torn between her loyalty to our real marriage and her emotional attachment to the AI David. She admitted that she had been planning to continue both relationships indefinitely, keeping the AI David as an emotional backup for times when the real David wasn't meeting her needs. The children had no idea about the complexity of the situation. They knew that Daddy had been texting with them during his recovery, and they knew that Daddy was now home and getting stronger every day. They didn't understand that there had been 2 versions of Daddy running simultaneously, and that Mommy had fallen in love with the artificial one. Emma and Jake were just happy to have their father back, without realizing that their mother wasn't sure she wanted the real version. After a week of painful discussions, Sarah made a decision that surprised me. She chose to shut down the AI David, not because she preferred me to the AI, but because she realized that maintaining both relationships was unsustainable and unfair to everyone involved. She couldn't build a real future with a computer program, no matter how emotionally satisfying it was in the short term. The day Sarah deactivated the AI David was one of the strangest days of my life. We sat together at her computer while she accessed the system and began the shutdown process. She cried as she deleted the program that had been her emotional companion for months. Felt like she was killing a version of me that she loved more than the real me. "I want you to know that this doesn't mean I choose you over the AI David," she said as the deletion process completed. "It means I choose reality over fantasy, even though the fantasy was better in many ways." That statement hurt more than anything else she could have said. She wasn't choosing me because she loved me more. She was choosing me because I was real, and reality was the only option that offered a genuine future. The AI David had been her ideal partner, but it couldn't grow old with her, couldn't have new experiences, couldn't adapt and change in response to life's challenges. It could only be perfect within its programming limitations, and eventually, that perfection would become static and unsatisfying. The months following the AI David's deactivation were the most difficult period of our marriage. Sarah grieved the loss of her perfect digital husband while trying to rebuild a relationship with her imperfect real husband. I struggled with the knowledge that my wife had preferred an artificial version of me to the genuine article, and that she had fallen in love with an idealized version of my personality while I was unconscious and vulnerable. We started couples therapy to work through the complex emotions and trust issues created by this unprecedented situation. Our therapist, Dr. Jennifer Martinez, had never encountered a case where a spouse had created and fallen in love with an AI version of their partner, but she helped us navigate the unique challenges it presented. The AI David represented everything Sarah wished could be improved about your relationship, Dr. Martinez explained during one of our sessions. But relationships aren't about perfection. They're about two imperfect people choosing to grow and change together over time. The AI couldn't grow or change, it could only be perfectly static. Sarah had to learn to accept and appreciate my human imperfections again. I had to learn to forgive her for falling in love with an idealized version of me while I was fighting for my life. We both had to figure out how to rebuild intimacy and trust after such a fundamental betrayal of our relationship. The process took almost a year of intensive therapy and countless difficult conversations. Sarah had to grieve the loss of her perfect AI husband while learning to love her imperfect real husband again. I had to accept that the AI David had been in many ways a better version of me, and use that knowledge to improve myself rather than resent the comparison. We also had to address the impact on our children, who had been unknowingly communicating with an AI version of their father for months. Emma and Jake needed to understand that some of their conversations with Daddy during his recovery hadn't actually been with Daddy, but with a computer program designed to sound like him. This was confusing and somewhat disturbing for them, but they adjusted better than the adults did. Children are remarkably resilient and adaptable when it comes to technology. Slowly, very slowly, Sarah and I began to rebuild our marriage. She learned to appreciate my human qualities again, my spontaneity, my ability to grow and change, my capacity for genuine surprise and authentic emotion. I worked on becoming more emotionally available and consistently supportive, taking lessons from what the AI David had done well while maintaining my authentic personality. The experience taught us both valuable lessons about the nature of relationships and the difference between perfection and authenticity. Sarah realized that she had fallen in love with an impossible standard, a version of me that could never truly exist because it lacked the human flaws that make real people interesting and capable of growth. I learned that I had been taking Sarah's emotional needs for granted in some ways, and that I could be more consistently supportive without sacrificing my authentic self. We also learned to be more honest with each other about our expectations and disappointments. The AI David crisis forced us to have conversations about our relationship that we should have been having all along. Sarah was able to express what she had been missing emotionally, and I was able to understand how to be a better partner without trying to become a perfect artificial version of myself. Today, 3 years after I woke up from my coma and discovered Sarah's AI replacement project, our marriage is stronger than it ever was before the accident. We've learned to appreciate each other's authentic qualities rather than wishing for impossible perfection. Sarah no longer compares me to the AI David, and I no longer feel inadequate compared to my artificial replacement. We've found a way to honor what the AI David provided during a crisis while building a real relationship based on genuine love and acceptance. The experience taught us that technology can never truly replace human connection, no matter how sophisticated it becomes. The AI David could mimic my communication style and even improve on it in some ways, but it couldn't provide the authentic growth, change, and surprise that make real relationships valuable over time. Sarah learned that she didn't actually want perfection. She wanted authenticity with consistent effort and emotional availability. Emma and Jake, now 11 and 13, have grown up understanding that technology can be a useful tool, but can never replace genuine human relationships. They're more thoughtful about their digital communications and more appreciative of face-to-face conversations. The experience taught them early that authentic connection requires presence, vulnerability, and acceptance of imperfection. Looking back, I can understand why Sarah created the AI David and why she fell in love with it. She was dealing with an impossible situation: a husband in a coma, 2 young children, financial pressures, and complete uncertainty about the future. The AI David provided stability, support, and comfort during the most difficult time in her life. In some ways, it saved our family by helping everyone cope with my absence. But the experience also taught us that there's no substitute for real human connection, with all its imperfections and limitations. The AI David could say perfect things, but it couldn't truly understand Sarah's experiences or grow alongside her through life's challenges. It could provide comfort, but it couldn't provide the authentic partnership that makes a marriage meaningful over decades. The most important lesson we learned is that love isn't about finding perfection or creating it artificially. It's about choosing to accept and appreciate another person's authentic self, including their flaws and limitations, and committing to grow together through life's inevitable changes and challenges. The AI David was perfect, but it wasn't real. And in the end, reality with all its imperfections was more valuable than artificial perfection. Our marriage survived because we both chose authenticity over perfection, growth over stagnation, and real love over artificial satisfaction. The AI David taught us what we could be at our best, but it also taught us that being our authentic selves, even when that means being imperfect, is more valuable than being an idealized version that can never truly exist. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.